Today we're going to be talking about transport in plants. And plants, like all other organisms, are going to have materials that they are going to have to move through their structures, right? And it's a little bit different in plants because, like when we think about our own systems and our own systems of transport, we have systems that do that. We have a digestive system and we have a circulatory system that help us transport those things that we need. And plants really don't have those. So they have their own system, and we're going to look into that today. So what are they going to be moving? They're going to be moving water, which is obviously really important for plants. They're going to be moving nutrients and other materials throughout all of their tissue using what we call vascular tissue. For plants to be able to grow vertically, they had to adapt a way to move needed materials to the tops of plants. And when you look at early plants, most of them were not growing vertically. They were growing horizontally along the ground because it's much easier to move materials that direction than against the forces of gravity, right? Because anytime we're moving water or nutrients or anything else, gravity wants to pull them down. So plants have to find a way to move them up. And in some cases, they have to move them several hundred feet up, right? If we're talking about very tall trees like sequoias and things like that, water has to get all the way to the tops of those trees. So this system has to be pretty well developed. And so that's why a lot of your early plants were very close to the ground or on the ground. And it wasn't for several million years later where we had plants that started growing vertically. Almost all plants are vascular. Now, again, some of the descendants of the very early plants are non-vascular, but most plants are vascular. So gymnosperms, angiosperms, ferns, mosses, they all have vascular tissue which helps them move nutrients. Vascular tissues allow fluids to travel through a plant body against the force of gravity. Okay, so this is the system that they developed which allows them to get the materials that they need from their root system up through the stems, up out into the branches, into the leaves. Within the vascular tissue, we have the xylem. The xylem is vascular tissue that carries water from the roots to every part of a plant and helps support the plant. Remember, water is not only fundamental to helping plants carry out chemical reactions, but also water is what allows a plant to stay upright. When we look inside of a plant cell, we have to have water because we have our plant cell here, and our plant cell is very rigid. It's made of usually cellulose, and then inside of the cell wall, we have a cell membrane, and the cell membrane is flexible, just like our cell membrane is flexible. So when we are when we're looking at this structure, we have the cell membrane, and when the cell membrane in the cell has plenty of water, it's going to exert pressure out against the cell wall, okay? It's going to exert pressure out against the cell wall. This keeps the cell nice and tight, nice and rigid. When we stack a bunch of cells like this together, what we wind up with is a very solid structure, okay? When you take the water away, what you wind up with is you lose that pressure that the cell membrane was exerting against the cell wall, and the cell looks like that. Now, it doesn't look all that much different than this cell, but when you lose that pressure, that turgor pressure, that makes the cell a little wobbly. Okay, so instead of these nice tight structures, you get a wobbly structure. That's why you have a plant when it is unwatered is going to look withered or wilted, and a plant that has plenty of water is going to stay upright. So water is not only, fundamental to keeping those chemical reactions going and supplying the plant, it truly is what keeps a plant from falling over. Again, stop watering a plant and you'll see that happen within a few days, right? The plant just starts to wilt because this is what's happening at the cellular level. So that xylem makes sure that all of that water gets to where it needs to go. The xylem is made of hollow tube-like cells, which are called tracheids. These are connected end to end and vessel elements that are wider, short cells. Both of these cell types are dead at maturity, and what that means is, or what that allows, is that allows them to be hollow. So once they mature, then they die, then they basically become hollow tubes and the water can move through. Water passes through the holes at the ends and sides of the cells and on to other tissues. Their cell walls are thick and contain a substance called lignin. Lignin is a compound that toughens cell walls to make them strong enough to support the weight of the plant. Because remember, plants have no bones like we do. Everything that, when we look at a tree, right? A tree is just a bunch of these cells stacked together. And so they have to remain stacked together. And again, as the cells die, then they're going to make that structure that allows the plant to stay up. In contrast to xylem, we have the phloem. Phloem is a vascular tissue that carries solutions of nutrients and food produced by photosynthesis. So the xylem is going to help move the water. The phloem is going to move all the things that we get from photosynthesis. There are a lot of different components to the phloem. We have sieve tube members, and these are the cells that make up the phloem. They're arranged end to end to create a tube, much like the xylem would be. They remain alive at maturity, but they lose almost all their organelles so that the fluid and nutrients can move easily through them. So the cells aren't doing a lot, but they still stay alive. The end of the cells have sieve plates that have pores, and that allows the fluid to flow from cell to cell. Okay, kind of like opens it up like a colander and just allows it to seep out. Along each sieve tube member is at least one companion cell, and these are connected to the members and produce and transport proteins to them. And remember, we all know what an important role protein plays in helping a cell, right? Cells can't survive without protein. The fluids in xylem move up the tubes through root pressure and osmosis. As the plant absorbs more and more water into the roots, it pushes up the stem through the tubes and into the leaves and branches, where the fluids move into other tissues from osmosis. The cohesion of water particles pulls molecules up and as they stick together. So really what this relies on is water. Okay? Water, because of its properties, right? We know that water is a polar molecule. Because of water's polarity, you have cohesion, which means the water molecules stick to one another. You have covalent bonding, which is happening between the water. Those covalent bonds are going to hold the water molecules together. So as one water molecule starts to go up, it links to another water molecule, which links to another water molecule, which links to another water molecule. So when the leaves are going through transpiration, where the water is leaving the leaves, that creates a net pull up, and those water molecules are going to stick together. And as they stick together through cohesion and those covalent bonding, they're going to move up the tree. So it starts with that evaporation, that transpiration out of the leaves, and once that water starts to move, because of water and its unique properties that it has a very strong cohesion property because of its polarity. That's going to help pull all of those water molecules up. If water didn't behave that way, then you would never get water to the top of these trees. If water didn't have such a natural tendency for cohesion, you would never see water at the top of a 200-foot tall tree. So very important to note there. In the phloem, the fluids are moving towards roots or growing structures that need sugars, which is usually down the plant. So xylem is going to carry things up, phloem is usually going to be carrying things down. So when it's carrying those things down, again, these are things that have been photosynthesized, that have been produced during the process of photosynthesis. The sugar source is where the sugar is made, and the sugar sink is the structure that needs the sugar. So again, remember, we're getting sugars out of photosynthesis. The sugar source has an abundance of sugars, so water enters to create an isotonic solution. That means they have the same concentration, and this causes the movement of fluids through the tubes as water is moving in and out, and sugar moves in and out at the sink where there's a low concentration. Again, we're working on the principles of osmosis here, right? In osmosis and diffusion, molecules are going to move from where there's a high concentration to a low concentration. Water is going to move from a high concentration to a low concentration. So that's how this sugar is able to move. It's naturally going to move from where it has a high concentration in the source to where there's a lower concentration in the sink. And that's pretty much all the systems of transport that a plant is going to use. It's going to need to get water. It's going to need to get nutrients. It's going to need to get those sugars that are produced during photosynthesis. And because of the system that most plants have, which is the vascular system, it allows all these nutrients and all of the water to move where it is needed most in the plant. I'll see you next time.